Hello, everybody. This is John Palmer, Speed Selling. This is the Raging Verbalist number 284. For those of you who are keeping track, if you're a veteran, glad that you're back. Always check that thumbs up, please, if you would. Notifications if you want to be alerted when we're going to do this. I hit the airwaves on YouTube and Facebook, and my Facebook group is Position to Win Book, which of course can be one handy. There you go. So real quick, I don't very often much into politics, but sometimes I do. And we're going to talk about a pretty important topic today. So away we go right now. And hopefully what you're going to do is get a lot of good information out of this. All right, so I'm going to talk today about my quest to put solar panels on my house in Southern California and what took place. And it's a long-term perspective. Usually, I watch YouTube videos and somebody's had them, a short period of time. And in my way of looking is that if, somebody doesn't have like some seasoning on them, who knows? Maybe it was an anomaly, maybe it was some other freak thing happened. Don't really know. So about 13 years ago, I decided I wanted to quit getting killed by paying very high electric bills. California has notoriously high electricity costs then, and they continue to work it up higher and higher. And I said, there's got to be a better way. So I kind of set out on a journey to add some solar to my house. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, this is really part one. I'll do part number two next week because there's a lot to unpack. Hopefully, this will be a eye-opening tale. If you want me to bottom line it, because of course most people want to get to the bottom line and not to get a lot of bullshit hype out there. Was it worth it? Absolutely. It is economically proven to be correct. Now you decide if you have, the green, religion, and if that's you, then that's you. That's fine. But I'm a money guy, so I was very interested in, does this thing pay off? Does this work? So it took a long time to get there. Now, by the way, why is there a gap? Why is there a gap between 13 years ago bubbling up and saying, wow, I should go get solar, and 11 years of having them on the roof? Well, that's because to do that, what did it take to get, solar? So here's what it took. First off, I talked to lots of different contractors. If you're ever approached in the Home Depot, the Costco, the mall, wherever the hell you are, mall, I mean, they're talking about slim pickings there. But what will happen is that you'll talk to these contractors and they'll tell you lots of fanciful things, and they'll say, well, you're paying too much for electricity. Yes, I guess you are, but that isn't the point. The point is that, how do we configure this thing? Because it is really a construction project. It is a economic circumstance. By the way, I own the panels outright. So just understand, I own them. I never leased them. I did get financing, but I never leased them. I'm not a big fan of leasing. Also, it complicates when you go to sell your house and you go to get your house appraised, because now you've got this kind of weird financing on your house. I know that the salespeople are out there going, oh, that's bullshit. No, it's not that hard. Yeah, it turns out it's hard. In fact, there's a real estate agent in Arizona. I was looking at buying a place in Arizona, and she said, no, I won't sell properties or list properties, do anything that has solar on them because it complicates the sale. She's right, it does. Depends on how you get snagged into this thing. So that's just understand, I own them. So first off, I needed to learn about it, and the amount of hype and nonsense and just plain wrong isms were pretty crazy. And it's about, for all these different sources. I mean, I went to, plugging stuff into Google, reading about it, and of course, one of the things that is dramatically hidden, and I say dramatically because it is cloaked in secrecy and darkness, is what the hell does it cost to put a system up on your roof? That's the only thing that matters really when you start off with it. Is how much does it cost to put a system up on your roof? So that is one of those realities of life. So there was a lot of hype, and that hype was really getting to me, getting on my nerves. First off, I started reading, Solar Power magazine. I'm sure they're gone by now, and some of these others. And every article started off with the same way: sanctimoniously, we're saving the planet, polar bears are breathing easier, and all this other stuff. The downside of it is that they weren't getting to the meat of it. And what they were doing is they were feeding people who wanted to think about getting solar or want to fantasize about getting solar, but not about how the hell to get solar. Turn to YouTube, watched a whole bunch of videos. Once again, there's a guy in, middle of nowhere, Utah, who went out and bought 6 used panels off of eBay, and he's got a soldering iron, and he's building wood racks, and he's doing shit like that. Oh, like, get out of here, man. I mean, I'm not, whatever you're going to save on electricity, you just lost by, working your ass off for free and doing all that stuff. So, okay. Now, there are very few numbers that people talk about, but I'm going to talk to you about numbers of what's going to happen and how you need to get your head wrapped around this and why this is so important to know what you want to do and how it's going to do. Bottom line is that it is depending upon your cost of electricity, because see, that is the biggest factor. If you have cheap energy, you live in some place like, I don't know, where there's a lot of, hydropower, putting in solar panels is going to be a tough sell. I know they've come down in price and they're so much cheaper. And boy, you hear about that. You see these charts and the green people go, look at that. It's the cheapest way to do it. Bullshit. It's how much it costs to install all that stuff. And can you install it? And what's involved in installing? That's the reality. I mean, great. If you're going to sell me electricity at 1 cent a kilowatt, call me on the damn phone, and I'll go buy an extension cord. I'll buy all of it that I can, and I'll start doing crypto mining, for heaven's sakes. Which, by the way, crypto mining is the number one cost of crypto mining is cost of energy, which is why they put it way up in Canada, right by the dam, because they have excess power all the time, so they get it cheap. That isn't what we're talking about. I live in Southern California, land of really expensive electricity. Also, it's tiered power. And what tiered power means is that every time you use another kilowatt, you're moving to potentially, you're not moving every single kilowatt, but you move through these tiers. And yes, they've jiggled them. There used to be 4 tiers. Now there's 3 tiers. The bottom line is that the first tier, and they don't even call it the correct thing because they're, again, bunch of politicians and regulators who want to obfuscate. Yeah, that's, I think, the right word, and hide what it really costs to get electricity. Well, let's call that survival. So you got a hot plate and a laptop and 100-watt bulb. I know nobody has a 100-watt bulb anymore, but you get the idea. That's the survival mode. Everything beyond that, well, I don't care what these people think. The reality is that you got to kick on the air conditioner when it's 99 degrees, like it was just the other day in my house. So that's got to happen. That's got to happen. So very little on the way numbers. So that's it. That's an issue. It took me a full 18 months to figure out what I needed to do. And that's what I'm sharing with you now. The other thing is that you need to learn how to do a very important thing, which is to read your electric bill. And I'm going to hide part of it. Read your electric bill. And if you don't read your electric bill and even understand it, it's easy to go look at your, whatever you're paying out and say, that's too damn much. Well, it's all about context. It's all about how much you're going to use and how much you're going to use in the future. Now, some people had predicted that we were going to use a lot less electricity in the future, which is partially true, right? Televisions take less power, everything's taking less power, so we're all going to do that. Except that now we have a whole march towards electric cars, which suck up an enormous amount of electricity. Go figure that out. Now, and of course, and that's a whole nother shell game, and I call it a shell game, because you have people who have, they say, well, we're going to give you a better rate or this or that. Well, yeah, except that I don't see that on my bill. Now, so it took me 18 months. Now, here's some myths that we're going to talk about, and this is important that you understand the myths. Here you go. Only put enough panels to reduce you from getting in the top tier. Now, that's going to be tough You got limited budget, you got limited resources. I got it. Nobody's got unlimited anything. But I'm going to tell you that if you only do that, like my neighbor did when he put in 16 panels and he did it for all the right reasons, but he and his wife were seniors. She ended up moving out. And this guy, if he had a radio, and I mean, literally had a radio in his house, because I had gone to his house several times to talk to him. Nice guy, sadly gone. But he had a radio sitting next to it's the Lazy Boy, and an antenna, and he'd listen to the ball games on the radio because it was better than watching it on TV. Or if he'd watch the TV feed and turn off the sound and listen to the radio. This guy had no consumption of energy. And somebody talked him into only putting in 16 panels. That's ridiculous. You need to put in as many panels as makes sense economically. And understand that you cannot predict. I mean, if big power companies, big smarty people cannot predict how much juice you're going to suck down the road, how the hell are you going to figure it out? That's a myth. Next one is only put in south-facing panels. So when you're looking at extracting the most electricity from the sun, the big ball in the sky, 93 million miles away, I don't know the metric equivalent, you got to know that you're going to suck as much juice as you possibly can. There's a limitation in how much you're going to get. And facing the south and having the bet. Now, your house, unless it was very unique, was not designed to have the best aperture, which is the right word, towards this big ball in the sky that's firing off all of this radiation and bombarding our planet. And what are they thinking? Well, that's a myth. South-facing panels may be more efficient. And if you're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, for heaven's sakes, what are you doing solar for? Because, geez, But if you're doing it, then you have to be very, very careful. However, that's math. Now, I'm going to say that myth cost me a lot of time, because as I'm talking to all these multiple contractors, what's the first thing they say? Well, look at that south-facing roof. Ooh, you got limitations. Well, it turns out I have a very long, expansive roof that points to the east. Now, what exists in the east is the big ball in the sky comes up every freaking morning, and it bombards the east side of my house. So every site is unique. And it wasn't until I talked to somebody at a company, which I think is gone, called Wholesale Solar, but I ended up talking to their tech guy in New Mexico, who looked at my house, not from sitting there on the ground looking up with a pair of binoculars. Kid you not, I had a contractor that never even got on the roof. Obviously, it was going to take them. And he looked at it and said, "Hey, man, you got a beautiful expanse here. You can just put in a crap load of panels pointing to the east, and that thing's going to start generating electricity." So part of the motivation of doing this Raging Verbalist, when I am, is that tomorrow, actually today, tomorrow, the day after, we go out and dance around excited, because this is the highest amount of energy we're going to collect on average are going to be these 3 days. And why? Because it's the longest amount of daylight, because I'm in a place where, it varies. So right now, if you look at it, 5 a.m, starts getting hit by some light. By 6, we're cooking, we're rolling along. So I have panels on the east and panels on the south. So the mythology of only putting them on the south is not correct. It's not true, because it is not a absolute. The next is you want to focus, that people focus on paneling. Well, how many panels? Instead of all of the other stuff you're going to need. You're building an electrical infrastructure. Why don't they talk about that? It sucks to try to sell people on an infrastructure. I know. I teach people how to sell all the time. That's why I'm called Dr. Speed Selling. Nobody wants to talk about the frickin' infrastructure, because infrastructure is like boring. Who cares? And this is where, by the way, people chintz out and they don't do a lot of things. When I found out that, putting 10 panels, 20 panels, 30 panels, 40 panels, this is where I ended up. By the way, the contractor I ended up selecting, very cool guy, Matt. He said, John, why 40 panels? I said, because when we map it out, you take the east and the south, 40 panels will fit. And if I'm already going to spend that much dough, let's put up the racking, let's run the wire bundles, let's do all of that, and let's do it once. And let's see what we're going to get. Because, by the way, I did not have a great model. Anybody who tells you they can model this stuff before you put it on the roof, they can, but it's hard because, you know, there's a difference between the theoretical and the reality of it. Now, if I go look at my bill, so I'm 11 months into my 12-month cycle. And right now I'm at minus $706 and change. And I'll be even more than that because we're in a very high, you know, lots of sun and everything. Now, if I had my druthers, would I have liked to have, changed over sooner? Yeah. But the point of it is that, that I'm in a good position. Now, I used to lament, my wife still does, that they don't send us the excess that we actually send to them in a check. Those days are gone and over, and we'll talk about that later in a bigger thing. But most people don't really talk about what it's going to do about that. The final myth that people have is they don't talk about the true cost to install. To install solar on your house, building, whatever, you have to say, okay, how much underlying structure has to be taken care of, improved, and all of that before I can install all this stuff. Now, it's easy to say, well, we're just going to throw some panels up on the roof. Ain't my experience. My experience is that you have to actually get very serious about what you're going to do. Now, what I'm hoping that I've gotten through in this beginning section is to tell you that I took it very seriously. I'm not going to tell you all kinds of hypey. I don't have polar bears dancing in a kiddie pool or anything like that. But what I do have is I have a positive cash flow, which greatly affected my value of my property. And that's a good thing because that's the point of doing this the right way. And I'm hoping that I'm giving you at least some insight, not perfection, which will have you thinking better about this process and learning how to do that. And if I've accomplished any of that, I appreciate a thumbs up. Love to have you subscribe. Love to have you understand better how this works. And if you have any comments or want to toss some things at me, more than happy to talk about it because we're going to keep expanding upon it because that is what this is all about. Now, before I go, let me just point out something because this is what the solar stuff is something that I did for my own financial well-being. When you put in solar, in my opinion, I don't care what the ancillary benefits are. If it makes you happy, if it lets you wrap yourself in the green cloth or whatever, okay, I'm good with that. You should do it because it puts you in a more defensible financial position. And we'll be talking more about that because to me, that is the real important part about it. I have not had an electrical bill in the state of California for 11 years. Now, this is my 11th year month. So, I mean, it's not quite full 11th year. So just take that as a little bit of squeaky and tweaky. But that is very important. Now, important also is what you do with your business. And I would highly recommend that you check out my book. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it, position to win. Get this at any bookseller, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You get a physical copy there. You can also go to positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com, and I'll autograph it. You can also get it digitally, and digitally you can get it from Amazon Kindle, Barnes and Noble Nook, and Apple iBooks. So I'd like to wrap up and say to you is solar or does solar make sense? And the answer is maybe, and it depends. Now, if you're in the right place, the right time, and you take the effort to do this, I put in a lot of effort. If you are foolish enough to pay retail, which I did not do, then what you'll end up with is a more expensive system, which in fact may never have the right payoff for you. But if you do it right, you're going to see great benefits. And we're going to pick up next time on going through how this thing came together, because most importantly, and hopefully this is why I talk about this, is that you get out of the crazy hype and nonsense that exists out in the marketplace where people say, This is a miracle. I can't believe it. I'm taller, my hair is growing back, my breath is fresher. None of that is true in my experience. But what is true is not having to have an electrical bill and the financial benefit of doing that. And with that, John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling. And this has been the Raging Verbalist number 284. We hope you have a great sunny, I'm hoping for really high sunny days here to peak out my solar production and make it work. And until then, we'll see you on the next Raging Verbalist.